the DNC to give the land acknowledgement. That being said, the DNC Poverty Council would like to acknowledge my, sorry. The DNC, wow, that is loud. The DNC Poverty Council would like to acknowledge my 6-time great-grandmother, Kitty Awa, of the Potawatomi Nation, who, with her husband, founded this great city of Chicago. They would also like to acknowledge and humbly thank all the Native peoples whose land was once their own. Indeed, the first true stewards of this land we gather upon today. This includes the Anishinaabe, known as the Council of the Three Fires, which includes the Ojibwe, the Odawa, as well as the Potawatomi. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.
Okay. So I am Susie Shannon. I'm the chair of the Poverty Council for the DNC and the founder of the Poverty Council. And we founded this council to give voice within the Democratic Party for low-income folks, people who hadn't had a voice in this party before or felt like we needed to be talking about these issues at every single meeting. So I am actually formerly homeless. My family was homeless when I was younger. I'm originally from Chicago, so I'm very excited to be back here. Thank you. Once a Chicagoan, always a Chicagoan, as I tell people in LA all the time. I just want to say, you know, our country is really in an affordable housing and homelessness crisis. We have over 500,000 people who are homeless in the United States, in the richest country in the world. This is unconscionable. In addition to that, there isn't any place where you can live in the United States basically working a full-time job at minimum wage where you can afford a 2-bedroom apartment. So we are in a huge crisis mode. I live in Los Angeles right now. We are the homeless capital of the United States. We have 75,000 people who are homeless just in our county, in the county of Los Angeles. And the rents are going up. I know that here in Illinois, there is a ban on rent control, and so we want to lift that ban so that we can actually get control of the rents here. But this is happening all over the United States. And I just want to say that something happened in January that not a lot of people talked about, but which made history in our country. And that is that the President of the United States, President Biden, in his State of the Union address, said to everyone, in the context of renters, that he was going to go after corporate landlords for price fixing and price gouging, which they have been doing all over the United States using a platform called RealPage. And not only did he say that, but he also said that he supported a 5% cap on rent. This is the first time in the history of the United States that we've had a president who actually talked about renters and rent control. And then he followed up in July by raiding the headquarters of Cortland Development, which was a corporate landlord that had been price fixing and price gouging and raising rents. Because we know what happens when rents are raised to a point where people can't afford it anymore. They get displaced from their neighborhoods. They become homeless. It creates a lot of stress. Children have to move and get pulled out of school, pulled away from their neighborhoods, pulled away from family. It's very destabilizing for neighborhoods. And so we're hoping that this Poverty Council becomes a huge platform to help people who are low-income renters, who are unhoused, to make sure that the policies that come out of the Democratic Party, like our platform, which was just passed that asked for a rent cap, and from our president, and then our vice president, Kamala Harris, who has echoed a lot of President Biden's policies, even to the point that 4 days ago, she tweeted this out. She wrote, "When I am president, it will be a day one priority to bring down prices. I'll take on big corporations that engage in illegal price gouging and corporate landlords that unfairly raise rents on working families." So that is a first. So I just want to say, I feel like our party is moving in the right direction. We know that we have a lot of work to do. We know that we need to keep sending the message to the Democratic Party and to our elected officials that it's very, very important that they prioritize low-income folks. They prioritize people who are low-income renters and who are homeless, because as I like to say, a lot of low-income folks, they don't have a union, they have the Democratic Party. And when the Democratic Party fails them, they have maybe some nonprofit organizations, but they don't have the base that they need to empower all of the work that we're doing here. And so we're going to keep pushing here in the Democratic Party, and we hope that you will be a part of that. So, yeah. 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 So those are all really good ideas. So I can speak for Los Angeles that in every single election, we have a voting center in the middle of Skid Row. And that's to make sure that people can make it to the polls, because obviously they're not going to get a ballot mailed to them if they don't have a mailing address. And so we just need to make sure that wherever there are folks who are in homeless encampments or even low-income renters who find it hard to get to the polls, because they're working, that they get that absentee ballot and they fill it out. But one of the things too that we did in 2020 was we started a Renters for Biden group, and because sometimes apartment buildings are so difficult to get into, we had people who were renters within the building printing out these signs and putting them up like where people would get their mail or at the front door in places like that, just to let them know. Because a lot of renters that I talk to, they've never actually seen a candidate. They've never had a candidate come to their door. And so we need to get inside of those apartment buildings and to renters who are going to help spread the word. And it's the same thing with homeless encampments. I mean, we had in San Francisco, when we had our meeting, we had somebody come from a homeless encampment to talk to our Poverty Council, and he would talk to everyone in the encampment about the fact that they were going to get a voice at the DNC. So thank you for that. Okay, I want to kind of move the agenda a little bit, but I'll take 2 more questions. Yeah, I mean, everyone should have an opportunity though, right? But it's up to them. And was there another question here that I can take? Okay. All right. I would like to introduce our vice chair, Christian Nunes, who is also president of National Organization for Women and also a surrogate for the Kamala Harris campaign. Please welcome Christian Nunes.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you all today, and thank you, Susie, for your work and your tireless work working to end poverty as well as homelessness. It is a pleasure to be here with you all today. I am here right now in this capacity to represent the campaign and really to talk about the work that needs to be done, but as well as what we are seeing happening right here in our nation. And we're going to have a real conversation about that, and also why it's important that we represent Democrats and Harris and Wells as president and vice president in this election. I want to start off by saying, if we look at what's happening right now, and as we approach the 2024 election, we know that our nation is facing a pivotal moment. In 2023 alone, the U.S. poverty rate saw its highest moment, a year increase that was higher than any time in history. rising to an unbelievable 12.4%. Child poverty as well doubled from 5.2% to 12.4% in just 1 year. Behind those numbers are millions, we know, of American families struggling to make ends meet. They're having to choose between paying their lights versus eating food. They're having to choose between going to work and not going to work if their child is sick and being homeless. We know people are living paycheck to paycheck, and the uncertain times of the future are things that many are experiencing. It's times like this that we know when we feel this crisis, we feel this chaos, we feel this uncertainty, we have to make sure that we're electing leaders who truly believe in the people and who want to make sure that they're standing for the people. Too often we have seen leaders who say one thing and do something different. And it's enough of that. It's a time right now where we want to make sure we're investing in leaders who are actually going to stand to their word and who have a history of showing us that they stand to their word. And I know for sure that by electing Vice President Kamala Harris and Governor Tim Walz to the presidential and vice presidential ticket for the United States of America, we're going to be choosing leaders who truly care for the people. We know the opposite of what we face, but they have shown us that they are working for the families. They have shown us this work, and they know the root of cause of poverty and what they have to do. It addresses housing insecurities. America is facing a severe housing crisis with a shortage of 4 million homelessness and housing units just as of 2020. And we know that for low-income families, that's more catastrophic. 73% of low-income households spend more than half of their income just trying to pay for their rent. That doesn't include utilities, that doesn't include food or transportation, all the things you need to just to get around and survive, get to work and make your ends meet. So those basic needs are still left you, and people are feeling despair. So we know also at the rising homelessness rate of 15% in 2019, that something has to be done. Harris and Walz are going to prioritize those needs. They prioritize affordable housing, fighting for fair wages, and working to uplift children and families because they understand that the lack of these equalities are centered in poverty. These are multiple inequalities that are centered in poverty. Too many Americans are trapped in poverty. And despite working full time, more than 39%, that is 23% of our population of the workforce, make less than $17 an hour. But yet, if you try to get an apartment, a 2-bedroom apartment, we know that's anywhere between $1,700 or more. And that's just for the rent. And transportation is not included once again. So we know the extreme despair and crisis and frustration it can put on a person. And therefore, we have to work hard. And then we know when you look at women and children, and we look at persons of color, there's even more a wider gap because of the gender wage gap. And that gender wage gap expands when it's persons of color and persons with disabilities. Right now, a woman of color is earning less on a dollar than a white man. 64 cents if you're a black woman, 57 cents if you're a Latino woman, and 46 cents if you're a woman with a disability. That is a shame, and something has to change. So I know we have to work and continue to work for people who are gonna help raise that wage to a secure wage. That's not just gonna make you survive, right? We gotta think about, this is more than just surviving. This is about thriving. And one of the things that I love what Vice President Kamala Harris says is that she's looking for America that deserves freedom to not just get by, but to get ahead. We all want to get ahead. How many of y'all want to get ahead? Because I know getting ahead is very important. And one of the things that I know I saw majorly happen that helped a lot of people, especially with child poverty, was when Biden passed the child tax credit in 2021. With that child tax credit alone, do you know it cut child poverty in half? Just with a child tax credit. How many children were able to eat? How many families were able to feed their children and parents were able to feel good at night because they're able to put food in their child's mouth? That's a huge thing, to have pride, to be able to feed your child and be comfortable. That's what we want. We want people who are elected who care about those things. But what we also saw was that the MAGA Republicans worked everything in their power to expire that tax credit and not vote for it, and then block legislation that would expand it again. And just recently, they blocked additional legislation that would expand it to cover as many as 16 million children. We have to work to make sure that we're electing candidates. And this is not just for Congress either. This is your local. Let's talk about your local. Because who you're putting in office locally, the Democrats you're electing locally, matter just as much as who we're electing in the White House. So we have to make sure that we're reaching out there and electing people who believe in us, who are invested in us, who also care about what's going to happen, and who believe in equity, who believe in making a holistic system work, who see us as equal, and understand what equity means. Because equality cannot exist without equity. So we all need that position. So as we talk about it, I just want you to all be encouraged. You all are valuable, and you're all good enough as we are in here. But we all have a role to make sure that we're putting people in office who are going to make existence and a difference in our lives, who are either going to help us or they're going to hurt us. And I know Harris and Walz are going to help us. We cannot allow poverty and inequality to deepen any further. The statistics tell us that, and we have an opportunity now to do our part. So I thank you. I don't want to take up too much more time, but I encourage you to do all that you can, and let's work together for solutions, because we have the solutions right here in this room. Thank you. I'm going to pass it over to Susie.
All right, Christian Nunes. I'd like to bring up now Hilda Solis, who is the former Secretary of Labor and also a county supervisor with the County of Los Angeles, and also someone who spearheaded the Hilda Solis Care First Village, which some of folks who were friends of mine lived there and just had so many great things to say about it. Just very innovative thinking in terms of helping people move from homelessness into housing. Hilda Solis.
First of all, good afternoon to everyone, and thank you so much, Susan, for all that you've done and your great partnership here. Both of you are outstanding. This is, for me, something that is very personal, because having also grown up as a child, first-generation immigrants in Los Angeles, parents came from different countries raising 7 children, if you could imagine. Back then, we didn't even know we were poor. But when you qualify for free lunch and all these other programs, summer programs, and even as a youth, qualifying for summer youth programs, which I'm a big proponent of, and I know this new administration will continue to expand upon what the Biden-Harris team has done, because workforce training for our young people is absolutely necessary. Not everyone is going to go to college, and that's not to say don't do it, but it means making investments. And part of what I do at the County Board of Supervisors is there are 5 of us, or 5 women, finally, 5 women. This board is as old as you wouldn't even imagine, and it's never had the ability to really have good representation. Now that has changed. I think a lot of it happened because of COVID, and we saw women really doing a lot of work. That's not to say that we don't want other people to get engaged, but it's just to say who's ready to meet the needs of our communities, who's ready to listen. And we have, as already been outlined, one of the largest concentrations of homeless individuals, unhoused people in Los Angeles County. We are the national epicenter right now. In the state of California, the number is larger, but the concentration, if you could imagine, is probably well above 77,000 on any given night, and that's probably an undercount, because when they do the count, it's usually for 3 days, but they just go out and kind of gauge who is in a tent, who's in a car, or who's living on a street. And in many ways, that isn't always the best and most accurate way to count people that are unhoused. We've got to become more sophisticated in doing that so that we can really prioritize the kind of funding sources that are really needed to eradicate this problem. And we need to do it, especially in Los Angeles. I will say that I represent an area that is part of Skid Row. I now represent all of Skid Row. In that area alone, which is like 12 or 13 blocks, there are more than 4,000 people that are homeless there. And I would say the majority are African American, Latino, transitional age youth, those that are young. And also I would say that we are now experiencing families, and we're seeing more elderly women, widows. So one thing I want to be clear about is sometimes we don't understand what unhoused or the homeless, who they are. They're our neighbors. Many of them look like us in this room. Many have fallen into poverty and extreme poverty. They may have lost their job. They may have been widowed and don't have any family and can't sustain themselves even on Social Security. They probably don't have a pension, and in many ways are now finding themselves out on the streets. That number keeps growing, and we need to also uplift those voices for women. Those women also, and others, young people, have been traumatized. I would say the majority of women that are living on Skid Row or out that are unhoused have been assaulted, sexually assaulted. And that is another trauma that they've experienced. Many were DV victims. I won't say all of them, but a good majority were. And when you're out on the streets, you're living that nightmare every single night. And if we don't build enough interim housing to at least get them stabilized and a place to go and a shelter to allow for that, then we're missing the boat. We need to take care of people. There's many things we need to do, but one of which is to help the unhoused right now. And I think we have to do that because if we can do it right in Los Angeles County, and I think we are getting there, thanks to the good work of our mayor, Mayor Karen Bass, who's also taken it upon herself to go out on the streets and provide assistance directly with teams, mental health, and teams that can work with individuals with lived experience to go out and talk to the homeless, tell them and work with them and show them that there's a place for them to stay, to stabilize, to get help. And if it takes 1 or 2 or 3 times, that's what it's going to take, if not more. And we're hiring people to get into those jobs right now in Los Angeles County because we can't find enough people who want to do the work, and we don't have enough mental health and social service individuals prepared. So my call for you is think about those things that you can do in your own neighborhoods. Think what you can do to help inspire other people to get involved, to help us mitigate this issue. And it isn't just in LA. I know it's in every big city, and we're finding that if we can't work together and try to get our cities, our local municipalities to understand an investment of funding using your previous ARPA funding. We used our ARPA funding to help during COVID, and what we did was immediately housed many of our unsheltered. We put them in hotels and motels, but we gave them more than that, wraparound services. So we had the Department of Mental Health, Health Services providing assistance. We also had individuals who could do assessments to see if some were ready to maybe work, some who needed more intensive care, maybe substance abuse and things of that nature. They were then identified. They received that while they were there. Many lived in these hotels and motels for a while, more than a year. And as a result, we got monies from the federal government, which we used, also from our governor, Gavin Newsom, and we purchased some of those motels and hotels, and we converted them into interim housing to have also the linkage of services. You can't just push people out. You can't just remove encampments, because we know what the Supreme Court just said, that it seems like it's a crime now to be homeless. And some cities are going to take it upon themselves to remove people. But if you don't have a place to put them, all you're doing is shoving them into another neighborhood or community, and you're still exacerbating the problem. You're not helping it. So we have to stand up and take a position on that. I think you all can probably do some work on that. I'm sure this council will help provide that information. But I want to say those are some immediate things to do. One of the things that that was talking about, Susan mentioned, was that we built some, through ARPA funding, immediate interim housing nearby, I would say off of Skid Row, but near our jails. Get this. County has a lot of property in many ways, but we had a parking lot that was going to be used to build out our men's central jail, tear it down and build a new one. And first of all, I'm not for that. So one of the decisions that I had was to use that parking lot as a place that we could build up some interim housing. And guess what we did during COVID? People were afraid to work and all that, but guess what? We got to work right away. We were able to pull together about $54 million, some of which $6 million came from my own discretionary funding, and we put it to use. We got in contact with a developer who could put together some containers, you know, the big containers you see in the shipping yards? You could convert them into units. You cut them in half, so to speak, and create single, instead of congregate housing, single units of housing for individuals. And guess what? They're fully contained in terms of heating, air conditioning, Wi-Fi, a bathroom, shower, a bed, a little refrigerator, telephone, whatever you need. It's all provided there. And wraparound services. And there's also a dog park. 232 units of housing. And it was on our property. So those local elected officials that are here in the room, or if you know of your friends, you might want to start asking them, what can we do to use our own assets instead of having to go out on the market? Use what you are not using now, and then get and research if you can get prefabricated housing, because it's just as cheap or cheaper to build, and we've done that too in my district, and it's very cost effective. But the key is to have wraparound services. You don't just put someone in an area. And you also can begin to also think about building out more housing also for families. We got a lot of children that are living with moms, single moms, that don't have adequate housing. Some are living in cars as we speak, and that is not acceptable. They may be going to school, but that's not enough. They need to be cared for. So we have an obligation to do that, and I hope that some of you will think about it in that way. I do believe that our nominee for president, Ms. Harris, who does know what's going on. She comes from Oakland. She knows what California is about. She knows the struggles of what we're going through in terms of poverty. She knows what it means to raise the minimum wage. She knows what it means to also provide assistance to those young people that get turned out of our programs, whether it's probation or foster care. We don't want them to land out on the streets. That's why in our county we're also providing a guaranteed income for these young people. And we're doing it on a pilot basis with foster care students right now, those that are between the ages of, say, 16 to 21. That once they come out of foster care, they can then obtain, hopefully, some housing or stabilize themselves so they don't end up homeless. That's one thing we're doing. And we're using our ARPA monies. We're using all the creative money that we receive from the federal government. So we know that we have to continue on this trajectory and continue to press this new administration and leadership to understand we can't leave anybody behind, and we have to go forward. We cannot go backwards. And that's why it's very, very essential that all of us make this the most consequential election in our lifetime, as was said yesterday, because it is. It does matter. And it matters who your elected officials are, and it also matters what they prioritize. So this has to change. And I would just say for all of the young people here and everyone else that's been inspired by the speeches yesterday, there's more to come. Don't let things overwhelm you. Don't listen to, as we know, the bad side of the politics that are out there to bring us down. There's more work that we can do. We are in a better place, but we know we have to do better. I can tell you in my district alone, I represent one of the poorer districts in East LA, East Los Angeles, downtown section, Skid Row I mentioned, and out towards Pomona, if you know where that is. People are struggling. They are barely making ends meet, even when our cost of living is so high, it's not affordable even to get into a new unit of housing, and the wages sometimes are very, very stagnant. Even though our minimum wage is higher there by law, over $16, it's not enough We still have parents or working folks that have to work 2 or 3 jobs. So we need to do more, and we need to take care of our families. Families first for everyone. So thank you so much for having me, and good luck. I'm happy you're here fighting the good fight. Thank you.
All right, give it up for Secretary Hilda Solis. Congressmember Jimmy Gomez is doing wonderful things in the state of California. He is congressional representative who is also the chair of the Congressional Renters Caucus, basically looking at legislation to help our low-income renters and to help give some kind of relief. Please give it up for Congressmember Jimmy Gomez.
Thank you, Susie. First, let me just thank everyone for being here. I had a similar background as the supervisor. My parents were from Mexico, brought over my 4 siblings. My dad was a bracero. He actually worked in the fields here in the United States, about 58 to 60, and then moved my family up. And I knew I was poor. Like, there's no doubt about it, right? When your parents are working, 4 to 6 jobs a week to make ends meet, never making more than $38,000 a year, you don't have health insurance. You don't take vacations. Your car is new and you don't turn on the heat because you can't afford that extra payment. You're poor, right? No doubt about it. When your main meal is always beans and eggs, you're poor, right? But you know what? I had it pretty decent because I know I had a place to live. When we first got here, we were in Orange County, and a developer bought up the neighborhood that my parents literally fixed up a house that was dilapidated, falling apart, paid rent on it, and the developer bought up that neighborhood, and we got kicked out. But fortunately, somehow, they were able to get a loan and bought a house out in Riverside, small. Back then, it was, 1,200 square feet at the most, and we all lived in that 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom house. As we got older, some of us would sleep in the garage, which I did. We put a bed in there, and that was an extra room. But you did what we had to do to get by. But getting by is not good enough. My district, which overlaps with Hilda Solis' district, is downtown LA, the east side of Los Angeles. And it has some of the highest concentration of poverty in anywhere in the country. But it also has some of the highest wealth. I tell people that this is definitely a tale of 2 cities. We're back here at a convention back in 1984. Mario Cuomo gave a speech about the tale of 2 cities, the tale of 2 countries, where one group is thriving and the other group is struggling. Not much has changed since then, but it's actually gotten worse, right? In my district, over 74% of the people in my district are renters. And that means, highest concentration of renters in the state, 3rd highest congressional district with renters across the country. But when I got to Congress, a lot of people across the country weren't talking about housing. Plain and simple. The blue states, the blue cities, the people where we really kind of had the housing crisis hit us first because the growth of our population was high, we were talking about it. But now the housing affordability crisis has spread across the country. I have a roommate his name is Darren Soto from Florida. All of a sudden he says the number 1 issue he's going to work on next year, housing, right? When I was talking to a Republican from Nebraska, I asked him, what's the number 1 issue facing your district? Affordable housing. So this is no longer a blue state, blue city problem. It's an America problem. And we need to be thinking bold and big in order to actually do something about it. That's why I started the Renters Caucus, because for too long we were divided, we weren't programming together, and now we have about 38 members who have joined the Renters Caucus, knowing that this is a major priority, not only for their constituents, but if we want our economy to grow and to help. This country can do more. But as I learned, I worked for Hilda Solis when she was a member of Congress. I worked for a city council member in LA. I studied housing at UCLA. Then I became an assembly member in California. And one of the things, what did I see? that most of our plans when it comes to housing and helping people, it's too small, too slow, and too inefficient. We need to be bold in our plans. We need to be bold in our plans and our ideas, but also our commitment to get that shit done, right? And I do feel like the tide is turning. So when we come to the Renters Caucus, we believe in a few things. One, you need to make sure that you lower the cost for renters, the people that are struggling, the people that are often on the verge of losing their job or losing their house and ending up on the street. We need to make it affordable for them to stay in. That means, you know what, giving them a little help now will save us millions of dollars later. So we actually worked with Kamala Harris when she first got to the Senate on a bill called the Rent Relief Act that basically says if you pay more than 30% of your income towards rent, you would get the difference between 30% and whatever you pay, say it's 50%, in a monthly check that goes directly into your bank account so you can actually afford that house payment. That is what we're talking about, helping renters. But then we have to make sure that we stop landlords from discriminating with the type of income you're paying with. So if you have a Section 8 voucher, that Section 8 voucher is good as money. That means that should not be held against you. And if anybody is doing that, they should be held accountable, plain and simple. So we need to take care of those issues and protect those renters and lower those costs, and also remove some of the barriers that we see. I work with Maxwell Frost when it comes to junk fees, right? To rent an apartment, they say, you need first month's, last month's, and a security deposit, if you're lucky, right? If you're lucky. And that keeps people from being able to get into a place. First month, last month's, and an application fee, right? And then a mail sorting fee. And then if you email your landlord, you charge another $50. That's the kind of shit that people get pissed off about, right? I get mad because it makes it so much harder to get by. And then at the same time, the other thing we're fighting for, is we need to increase the supply of housing across the country, plain and simple. First, affordable housing must be a priority across the country. We need to increase the low-income housing tax credit to a rate that is building at least 500,000 units a year, right? So in Build Back Better, the low-income housing tax credit, where we fought tooth and nail against everybody, was only going to build 800,000 units over 10 years. Too small and too slow, right? We need to think bigger. So when Kamala Harris came out and talked about, hey, we're going to help people, right? We need to build 3 million units over the first 4 years. It's exactly what I've always believed. We need to build 1 million units of housing on top of what's already being built, with a good chunk of it being affordable, 1 million for the next 10 years. That's how we actually increase the supply and lower costs. If we don't do that, we're going to be running in place, and nothing's going to get better, and people are going to be struggling. And so we're gonna work on that. So one of the things, I'm on the Ways and Means Committee, which is the tax committee, and next year we have a huge fight. You know what the fight is? The Republican Donald Trump tax cuts are finally going to expire. So that means that that means there's going to be a big opportunity to restructure the tax code. Instead of allowing, if Donald Trump gets elected, he lowered the corporate tax rate from 33% to 21%, and he wants to lower it again. What we're going to try to do is make sure that we actually increase that corporate tax rate and then take that money and invest it back into working people. And what does that mean? That means the low-income housing tax credit. That also means the child tax credit, which is advanceable. That means you get a payment every month. You don't have to wait to get that check when you file your taxes. That it's fully refundable. It doesn't mean you have to owe taxes to get it. because that's what cut child poverty from 40 to 60%, depending on where you lived in. And then if you're a U.S. citizen to I-10 holders, you deserve that check as much as anybody else, right? And we're going to also push for the I-10 holders who are here, right? That's what we talk about, bold plans, and that's what Kamala Harris is about. And then she also, when she announced that we're going to build 3 million new units, but also starter homes for people, right? Starter homes that actually allow people to buy into the American dream. I called, and additionally, $25,000 in down payment assistance. I called the Ways and Means Committee staff. I said, I want those bills. And they said, they're yours. So I'm working on introducing bills that will focus and help working people to buy their first home, but not, and I'm going to actually say not for $25,000. I'm going to go for $50,000 in down payment assistance. And when we do that, we get more people bought in. What's going on here in this country is people have lost faith that the American dream can still work. And I get it. Like, I didn't buy, like, I was, at 30, I went to an ATM, put my bank card in, and it wouldn't even, I couldn't even pull out $20, right? I was lucky to get a job working for a labor union, saving money, eventually buying a house. But I didn't buy a house until I was like 38, almost 40. And I was lucky. I'm a lucky one. So that's what I'm like, but we have to restore the idea that we can move ahead in this country. There is something called, I read something about the burn it down moderates, right? They're not progressives, but they're so frustrated that they also believe that the system should be burnt down. And unless we actually help the working class, right? The ones that are the working poor, and the people that are also struggling and living on the streets, that the dream of America will wither on the vine. So with your help, I know we can do a lot of great things. And so next year, Kamala Harris, it's going to be a big year. If she wins, we win the Democratic majority in the House, we're going to rewrite that tax code and get the money we need. So thank you, guys.
All right, give it up for Jimmy Gomez, fighting for us in Congress. I'd like to bring up my sister in the struggle in poverty, a woman who is a labor icon and who has been organizing farm workers. You will know her, Dolores Huerta. Please give it up for Dolores Huerta. And Congresswoman Maxine Waters should be here shortly, and then we're going to have a panel on Chicago and what's going on with housing and food insecurity. Yeah, come on up. All right, Dolores Huerta, everyone.
Good afternoon, everyone. Wasn't that a great presentation? Let's give Jimmy Gomez another applause. You know, I think there's something about when people who were in labor unions, like Jimmy, he was, of course, worked for AFSCME before he became a congressman, and people that are organizers, and when they get elected into office, they do really great things, okay? So let's give him another applause. I think everything that he talked about was so hopeful in terms of people being able to get housing, to get shelter, as we know is one of the big issues that we have in our society right now. Who ever thought? I remember when I was 17 years old, going to Mexico City, and I saw something, some books on the ground. And I thought, what is that? And then I went up close, and it was people sleeping on the sidewalk. You know, like, I'm quite old. I'm 94 years old. So I was, And the reason I'm saying this, because I lived through the end of the Depression, right? And I remember as a kid, people coming to our house asking for food. And my mother would always tell us, you have to make sure that when somebody comes to your house for food, that you give them food, you know? So my mother worked 2 jobs. So my brothers and myself, we would make a big stack of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, right? And so when people would come to the door asking for food, we would give them, you know, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And then, as I was saying, when I saw this in Mexico, people sleeping on the ground, I never in my wildest dreams ever thought that I would see that in the United States of America. I mean, and I think when we see so many people that are homeless, and I say that this is kind of a blatant example while our model of capitalism does not work in the United States of America. You know, when we are such a wealthy country, and yet we see so many homeless people, so many people without shelter, and somehow we seem to be helpless to do anything about that. And so we keep talking about how we have a rich, thriving economy, and you know, people are making tons of dollars and millions of dollars, and yet we have people that are homeless, we have people that are hungry, and there is something wrong with our system, and we know that our system has to be changed. And when they talk about, you know, people kind of wring their hands and they say, well, what are we going to do about the homeless? Well, there's one simple way, is to prevent them from becoming homeless in the first place, right? And yet, you know, we see things going the other way. We see that there are corporations that are buying up houses, and you see the ads on your television, you know, yeah, we'll buy your house, you know, no matter what shape it's in. And then these corporations that are buying houses, and they're not going to sell the houses. They want to make this into some kind of economy. Well, all people can do is rent. That you will never, like what Jimmy Gomez was talking about people being able to build some kind of wealth in their families, and that is what a home is, right? That's your equity. And yet, what they're trying to do is they're trying to get this monopoly on houses, and nobody can ever buy a home again. So everybody is subjected to be a renter. And then what happens to the renters? We all know the horror stories of people who are renters, and there's something wrong in their home. The water heaters aren't working, the AC isn't working, things are wrong, and then they complain to the builders, and they have these apartment managers, you know, like these middlemen or middle people, and they don't fix what's wrong. And then the renters have to try to get some kind of remedies, and these landlords are tyrants. They are tyrants, you know, and people are so afraid of them, they're afraid to do anything about that. We have one of our staff in our foundation, who her mother, you know, she's an elderly woman, and she's having trouble with her apartment, and not only she, but all of her fellow renters, and they cannot get any service, and yet they get threatened by the landlords. They get threatened. So we know that this system that we have right now is not working. It's not working, and we've got to make sure that we change it. Well, luckily, anybody here from California? Any Californians in the house, okay? Californians in the house, good. Well, in California, we do have, thankfully, we do have a proposition that's going to be on the ballot, and it's a very democratic proposition, because basically what the proposition does, Proposition 33, it allows every municipality, every place where people can actually, they can pass an ordinance in their municipality that people can actually vote to cap the rents, okay? To make some kind of a cap on the rent so that they cannot raise the rents. Now, we know that there are some places like people from New York City. Anybody from New York City? Yeah, right. We know New York City had rent control. I lived in New York City for 4 years during the Great Boycott, and we knew that people there had rent control, and they were able to keep that rent control. I think in California, Santa Monica, Tom Hayden, when he was a mayor over there in Santa Monica, they were able to pass rent control in Santa Monica. But this is what we have to do throughout the country. In addition to what Jimmy Gomez was talking about making funding available so people can actually buy their homes, getting that funding available. But we've also got to make it possible that people who are renters also do not have to be so squeezed that they can't afford to buy food. And I don't know if you recently read some of the news that's happened now with the insurance companies, okay? Habitat for Humanity, which is an organization that helps people build their own homes. And so in some places in our country, people were able to come together, and they did all of the hard work. They did all the elbow work, to build their homes. And so they were able to get a home because they did the work to build their homes, and their rents were very reasonable, maybe like $600 a month, $700 a month. But now the insurance companies have come in there, and before, when they had a rent that they had to pay like $600 and $700, now, because of the insurance companies, the home insurance companies, now the rents have gone maybe from like $600 a month to over $1,700 a month. So people are losing their homes because they cannot pay their mortgage plus the home insurance. So here we've got this corporate, I'm going to call it corporate greed, right? It's corporate greed. And this corporate greed is squashing our economy in the United States of America, and poor people are paying the price. And so we know that probably the only way that we can tackle any of this is to make sure that we can get some good progressive people elected to different levels of government and say, we've got to stop this, okay? We've got to put a stop to it. We've got to put a stop to people being homeless. We've got to pass some kind of legislation so people can keep their homes, people can afford to buy homes, and just stop this homeless crisis. The richest country in the world, the United States of America, we are the richest country in the world, and yet we have so many homeless people, so many people living in poverty. So, Poverty Caucus, I got to say, we got to fight this, right? We got to fight it. So we'll start with our new president, Kamala Harris, and go on with to get some more good Congress people like Jimmy Gomez and other people like him elected, and so we can put a stop to it. Can we do it? What do we say? Se puede. For those of you that don't know what that means, and President Obama, he used that, yes, we can, right? So when I met President, I'll share a story with you. So when I met President Obama for the first time, he said to me, I stole your slogan. Yes, we can. And I said to him, yes, you did. Yes, you did. But we're going to continue using that slogan. Yes, we can. Yes, I can. All of us working together. Yes, we will end homelessness. We will end poverty. Si se puede. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Susie.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, Dolores Huerta, everyone. All right, we have one more speaker who's still on her way, and that is Congresswoman Maxine Waters. If you've never heard her speak in person, it's absolutely incredible. Right now, I'd like to bring up our panel. These are folks from the community who work every day on housing, on food insecurity, and homelessness issues. And so I'm going to introduce them right now. First up is Rod Wilson, who's the Executive Director of the Eugenia Burns Hope Center. Rod, come on up. We work very closely with Rod on renter issues and housing issues. Dixon Romero. He's the Executive Director of Community Benefits for the Obama Library and the Not Me, We organization. Dion Dawson, founder of Dion Chicago Dream, fresh produce, food trucks that combat food insecurity. And Shannon Bennett, Executive Director of Kenwood Oakland Community Organization. And Alderman Byron Sicho Lopez, co-founder of, should probably put my glasses on, co-founder of Lift the Ban for Rent Control and sponsor of the City Council resolution on rent control. Give it up for them. Cool. And have a seat. And then actually before they go, we have another speaker here, Alan Minsky, who is from Progressive Democrats of America. I'm going to do a couple of minutes and we'll start. Come on.
I married a woman a few years ago, and she was one of Ricky Chavez's, one of Dolores' child's best friends, so I had to say hi. Please forgive me. And I left my notes down there. And in fact, if anybody could hand me that sheet of paper, that'd be great, because it's very quick. Look, the few times I've spoken on the Poverty Council before, Susie has mentioned that I I played a very minor role in helping this Poverty Council be formed. I wrote an article for The Nation magazine. It was a struggle to get it formed, okay? And I just want to say all credit goes to Susie Shannon for forming this thing. But on my personal resume and my CV, that's always going to be there because this is a really important body, okay? The Democratic Party, and I am a left progressive and I am a left progressive, and I'm inside the Democratic Party. There are two parties in this country. It's the way the system is structured. There's the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. And if we're going to make positive social change in the society, and we have deep entrenched poverty in the United States of America. It's existed my entire adulthood life, and we need to be active inside the Democratic Party. When it comes to the general election, we have to elect the Democratic Party, and again, that means this Poverty Council is a place where ideas germinate, they go out from, and they need to influence the one party that's going to produce social change that we need in the society. So a big round of applause for Susie Shannon. Along those lines, I do live in Los Angeles. Look, Skid Row, Jimmy Gomez is my congressperson. By the way, he is a walking advertisement against term limits, folks. I've watched Jimmy Gomez just mature into a really, really powerful legislator, and he produced an incredible package on housing that's really important going forward. But also this vote, yes on 33 in California, is huge. Look at that in terms of the national elections, and if you're in California, do what you can to support. Look, Progressive Democrats of America, there's been a large focus on housing today, but we are an organization, and we are the organization, for instance, we've had a big influence on American history already. We drafted Bernie Sanders to run for president. We were the sole national organization to do that. A lot of arm twisting went into that, and we were able to get Bernie to run, and he really elevated up left progressive politics in the United States. And as I just mentioned, in my entire life, in the richest country in the world, in the history of the world, as Bernie says, right, you have entrenched poverty that pretty much is about 100 million people, okay? Now, we put forward something we call a 21st Century Economic Bill of Rights, and I'm not going to go over that now, but it echoes Roosevelt. And of course, at the heart of it is if you work a job and it's a full-time job in the society, you should receive compensation commensurate with a living wage so the one job covers you with full, of course, health care benefits, vacation time, et cetera, okay? And then there's 9 other things there. But also, we're realistic beyond just having that overarching framework for our economic policies. And so what we've done is we're developing 4 different focused deep policy, basically platforms, and the first one we've already produced, and I'll explain what all 4 are. They look at where entrenched poverty exists in the United States of America. Now let me ask you this. If you lift 100 million Americans out of poverty into a prosperous middle class, right? We're the only of the wealthy democracies in the world that have that kind of circumstance. We're also the most dynamic consumer market in the world. If you lift 100 million Americans out of poverty into the prosperous middle class, you're going to have such GDP growth. I mean, that's basically what's happened in China, by the way. They've lifted 400 million people, right, out of poverty into their middle class. If we do that in the United States, let me just tell you, we should be able to sell to it's not just about eliminating poverty, it's about building a prosperous middle class. It protects the middle class. And if you're even a capitalist and you're an investor, and you lift 100 million Americans out of poverty, you're one bad investor and one bad capitalist if you cannot make money in that circumstance. So there you go. Okay, but lastly, the 4 places we look at are, of course, the urban core. deep entrenched poverty in the urban core. And so we're developing a 21st century template for urban renewal. We've already developed and published the Rural New Deal because there's deep entrenched poverty in rural and small town America. There's deep entrenched poverty in particular in the southeast of the country. And so we're developing a progressive southern strategy with an economic core. And finally, as much as there's this unbelievable racial wealth gap that exists between black Americans and white Americans, indigenous Americans are even poorer per person. And so we look at indigenous communities, and all 4 of those are going to be subsets under the 21st Century Economic Bill of Rights to build a low to no poverty America, okay? And we really need that to be a no poverty America. And the only reason we even include the low 2 in is because, yeah, there are probably going to be some people who are going to want to take in a society that's a prosperous middle class. They'll want their freedom. They might choose by their own choice to live outside the economy and qualify as poor. But no, really, it is a no poverty America. We can do it, and we can do it in the Democratic Party, and we can do it with the Democratic Party conference. That was more than 2 minutes. Thank you for letting me get the time. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, thanks so much. Alan Minsky from PDA. Okay, I want to turn to our panel now, and I want to start with Rod Wilson from the Hope Center. And I want, Rod, if you could just give a snapshot for the audience on what's going on with housing in Chicago, particularly with public housing, as we've discussed. And then some of the things that you're working on, and then we'll go down with all the panelists.
Thank you, Susie, for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity. I want to also acknowledge Reverend Barbara Jones from my former church. He's with us today. For those who don't know, Chicago is in a historical moment where, for the first time in its history, we have an elected school board that we're getting, that will have elections from fair people on the candidates. But he said he's been a champion of all the housing issues that we've been working on every issue that's really been relevant to low-income and working families in the city of Chicago. So we love and appreciate having a comrade in this fight. At the Hope Center in Chicago, let's start there. So with public housing, we went through a process called Plan Transformation. Started in 96. Yeah, there's a 10-year program that was supposed to. What it was supposed to do was get rid of the high rises, rebuild the housing, lower mid rises, and make a mixed income. We were trying to transform the housing. So around 96, 97, 98, they started really tearing down the housing, the high rises. Chicago became part of a program called Move to Work that was created under Clinton. It was supposed to be high performing housing authorities across the country, and over 3,100 housing authorities, 35 got this program. Chicago shouldn't have been in it because it was under receivership because it had been so poorly mismanaged for generations. But they made a deal, Chicago got in. What ended up happening was we had 39,000 units of public housing. 25,000 were actually occupied. So what they said they were going to do was tear them down, rebuild up to 25,000. So out the gate, we were going to lose 14,000 units of public and affordable housing, and we did. They still never really built back the other housing either, so all the other housing as well. And so when you go to certain developments, you'll see large acres and acres of vacant land that housing was on it that's still sitting there now. This is supposed to be a 10-year program, 2000, 2010, we're in 2024, and we still have all this vacant land. Now, over the past years, what's been going on is that they were taking the land and using it for other purposes. In 2014, there was a company called Access Tennis. They took a block of a city, Chicago city block of public housing land and Barbara Taylor Homes to get built a tennis facility. They also took some land at the Harold Akey's homes and gave it to Jones College Prep for athletic field. Harold Akey's is on 24th CHA, Chicago Housing Authority, they have tens of thousands of people on the wait list. Some people have been on the wait list 8 years, 10 years, 15. We even have an alderman who was Janelle on the wait list for 20 years. She's an alderman now, and her number just came up 20 years later. But the point is, how can you, with a good conscience, get rid of so much public housing land with such a need we have to one, a billionaire who will buy land anywhere, but for a training facility for soccer field, but that was under the old administration. We fought that tooth and nail. We took it to court, HUD, CHA, Secretary Budge. We didn't win, and so now we're working with the residents to get what we're supposed to get out of it, meaning the renovation of their apartments, but also trying to push CHA to build the housing back on that land. Same thing happened at the Harold Acres last year. They tried to take some vacant land to give it to the South Loop residents, Florence South Loop residents, to have them build a high school. A high school we wouldn't have been went to. It's a Florence residents. They tried to take a school previously. It was a high performing black school. They tried to take that school, elementary school, make it high school, and the court stopped it. So then it came to public housing land. And so we've been able to hold them off. So the plan is not on the table anymore. And it's thanks to, the new administration we have in Chicago. We have a new mayor who's been in about a month. It was a month and a half, yes. And the new CPS board that has come in, and now we're going to our first election. So, but there's been this land grab of public housing land. The Chicago Housing Authority has been a slush fund for mayors for generations, and it's been poorly mismanaged. And we have felt the bad end of that, because we're the ones that are not getting the housing. We're the ones that get suburban housing, where it's not elevators nowhere. We just did a press conference last Thursday. We live one homes because we have some seniors in the organization that live there, and if elevators go out every other month, and they're stuck on like 4th to 6th floor, they can't walk down up and down the steps. And the head of CHA came over there last Tuesday and said, well, what's on a 5-year plan? So they gotta wait 5 years to get an elevator, working elevator. That's crazy, right? So CHA is all in Chicago, and right now we are working to push the new administration to work with us on putting together a new plan for CHA, a plan that really looks at how do we get the great service to tenants, but also build back the housing that we need. We are currently 19,000 units under the maximum amount of units that CHA can have. 19,000 units under that. So we're really trying to push the city to help us. And CHA is a sister agency. I don't like if you know how public housing goes. It's a sister agency to the city of Chicago. But that's kind of the condition of what we're working with right now in public housing in Chicago.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, Alderman Cicho Lopez. Okay, so what's going on in the city and what can we do to fix it?
Thank you. I think it's great to be here with all of you today. It's important that we're here in Chicago. We're glad that we have a mayor who cares about housing and has been unapologetic about referring to housing as a human right. And there's nothing more important, I think, we have heard from a few congressmen, congresspeople referring about how critical and urgent the need of building more public housing, affordable social housing. There's never been a more critical moment, and I think when we hear from some of the panelists earlier about corporate greed, I do think it's important to describe what has happened and what is the current status of affairs right now today. I think it is critical to understand how this neoliberal system has failed the vast majority of Chicagoans. Today, as we speak, there are 80,000 units of housing empty. 80,000 units of housing are empty right now in the city of Chicago. It is not unique, a phenomenon that is not unique to Chicago. We see that in a lot of major cities. When we have vacancies, at the time when we have so many people unhoused. In Chicago alone, we have 69,000 people who are waiting to be housed. And as we also are facing with We also have right now 45,000 new neighbors that are right here in our city, on top of what we already dealing with. That is what Mayor Johnson has inherited. Also, as Rod has mentioned, a real shameful attack on the Black community, and I would describe it as such. 50 schools were closed down in a time when we needed them the most. In the poorest areas of the city of Chicago, mental health clinics were shut down, and as Rod mentioned, public housing that was supposed to go, has to be rebuilt, was not only dismantled and promised to be rebuilt, it was never built back. So in those conditions, 300,000 Black residents left the city of Chicago in the last 15 years or so. And I think what we are doing here in the city of Chicago is building real solidarity among our communities, not allowing the narratives to divide us and pitch us against each other. Mayor Johnson has said it well. We are talking here in the city of Chicago about reparations, and again, we also unapologetically saying housing is a human right and everyone coming to the city will be able to get some help. Unfortunately, we have not seen the help that is needed yet, but I'm hopeful that our next president, and I'm optimistic that we can defeat the fascists that are trying to put us one against each other and change the narrative about what they are doing to us so that we can build a different imaginary that is possible and within reach. And what we're doing here in the city of Chicago is addressing this urgent need. James Baldwin said it and said it well. All children are all ours. And I think Mayor Johnson, as a social studies teacher, understands that and is delivering on that. So Mayor Johnson is working with us. Right now we have a bond, a TIP bond, that was issued. One of the first things that Mayor Johnson did, and have to put it through a really heated debate that I think, in my opinion, wasn't necessary, but those forces of division continue to be there. One of $1.25 billion to build affordable housing across the city of Chicago, to go to the poorest neighborhoods of the city. I was in the last plan at the building commission. In the past, we built anything for everybody except for working people or poor people. The last meeting, I saw at least 5 projects, all in the south side of the city of Chicago. The change is coming, but it's slow. And I think that we need for that partnership, and I think the federal government can be, and should be, and needs to be, a better partner. We need to work with HOT so CHA can deliver those 20,000 units. Right now, there's a few thousand units that are completely vacant within CHA. As people need urgent shelter, we cannot fail. Our residents have worked so hard, again, even to do the federal government's job, when we're receiving new neighbors. Chicago is the city of North Shore that I'm so proud to be in the city of Chicago. But we cannot do it alone. And that's what we need of the federal government, resources, investment to rebuild affordable housing. I just finished with another quick story about that is so possible. I went with a delegation of elected officials across the country to visit Vienna. And in Vienna, a one-bedroom apartment rents for $300 a month. In a city very similar to Chicago, receiving also a lot of migrants with their right-wing extremes that are also trying to pitch people against each other. Yet they continue to build affordable and public housing, social housing. And about 80% of people live in subsidized housing. It is not referred as the third world, as far as I'm concerned. It is actually a city that is a model. And yes, this was built by a progressive coalition, and I think it's important that we know that there are models out there that can help us, but we need investment. We need to regulate corporate greed, transnational corporations that right now pay zero in taxes, yet they rip off the generational wealth of our communities. We need to create protections for tenants. We need to create also legislation. We're going to ask our governor to lift the ban on rent control, for instance. We need to lift the ban on rent control so that we can subsidize and help those small homeowners that are helping those tenants and have cheap rents, affordable rents. And I think that is important that we don't allow corporate greed and corporations, transnationals, to hide behind small homeowners and pitch us against each other. We need to protect tenants, and we need to protect those small homeowners. We need to build a coalition of working people against corporate greed, and I think it is within reach, and it's happening here in Chicago.
Woo. Okay, hold on just a second.
Well, Susie, while you're doing that, I have one
Um,
thing. What's the virus?
Okay. Okay. I just wanted to say Congressmember Maxine Waters has arrived, so I'm going to pause the panel for just a second, let Maxine come and let us know what she's doing to actually fix all of these problems, including helping to preserve public housing land for public housing. Woo.
Hello, everybody. Look, I want to tell you, one of my dearest friends in the world is Susie Shannon. I call her Susie Q. And I want you to know that at the state level, and now, of course, with the DNC at the national level, she is making sure that the Democratic Party stays focused on poverty and the lack of everything for people who are living lives that are absolutely unbelievable. So here's what. As I walk in here today and I see you and I see the panel, I want to thank the panel for taking time out to be here. And I see those of you who have decided that you're going to find your way into this complicated place in order to be here with us today. And so the first thing I was thinking when I walked in, everybody's so nice and quiet. Hell, you ought to be mad. You ought to be pissed off about the poverty in this rich country. And so I thank Susie Shannon for always making us focus on what we should focus on, and that is America should not be a country where people are sleeping on the streets at night, where children are going to school sleeping in their cars. The homelessness is shameful and unconscionable, and it is the greatest indication of poverty. I want you to know that as the chair of the Financial Services Committee, I have bills, I have legislation. In a few minutes, I'll share that with you. But let me talk about Chicago for a moment. Well, Susie Shannon brought a crowd to Washington, D.C., and we learned a lot about public housing in Chicago. And we learned about, a confrontation kind of going on about what was going to be done with land that was owned by the housing authority. And so we took a look at it, and it's causing us to take a look at housing authorities all over the country. And then I discovered that not only do they have this land, they can do whatever they want to do with it. And despite the fact that HUD, you would think, would have the authority, when we contacted HUD about it, they said, well, we don't control that. We can't say anything about that. And so we don't think that's true. And so we're going to make sure that we do everything that we can to make sure that housing authorities can do whatever they want to do with the land. Now, I don't know, I don't remember exactly whether it was a soccer field or it was a shopping center or whatever. No, that land belongs to us. It belongs to the housing authority. And we have to make sure we don't stop this fight. We don't let them get away with it. If they get away with all of this in Chicago, it makes it difficult to get away with it all over the country. So, when we take back the House, and if I have the gavel, and I know what to do with it, and I'm going to make sure that we deal with this issue. Now, in addition to that, I want to tell you, public housing has been without the resources that it's needed for years. And so when we take a look at whether it's New York or California, what have you, and so one of the things I discovered in LA with Nicholson Gardens, Jordan, Downs, Imperial Courts, all of the housing authorities there, that I now got redistricting back into my district. We have what we call earmarks, and this is community projects. And the housing authority there had decided that they were going to put some material on top of the buildings to cool the buildings in the summertime. I got with the boys in the housing authority, said, no, we want some air conditioning. And guess what? We got air conditioning going in public housing in Los Angeles in my district. But we've got a lot of work to do. We've got a lot of work to do to eliminate poverty. I could talk about housing all day long, but that, of course, is central to what people don't have money to pay and don't have the assistance of their government, whether it's local or state, whatever, in ways that it should. We spend a lot of money, and we send a lot of money to the cities and the states. We are now questioning how it is managed, and that even goes to Los Angeles. Nobody likes me to mention Lhasa. But we have to take a look at what Lhasa is doing in our own city. We have over 70,000 people on the street every night, and in this country, over 753,000 people who are sleeping on the streets every night. So housing is very important for us to talk about in terms of poverty. But of course, a lot goes along with that. Poverty rips children from the thinking that they can somehow be something important and good and wonderful. Because when you're poor and you're a child, nobody really pays attention to you. People talk at you, and people take a look at you because your clothes are not what they should be. I remember being in, was it grade school? James Weldon Johnson Grade School in St. Louis, Missouri, not too far from here. And I want you to know, I don't have many of them are passed. There was 13 of us in my family. And so you know we were poor. We didn't have very much. But I knew I was poor, and I felt poor. I felt like I was, being denied. I felt like people were ignoring us. I felt like, something was wrong. But I had some great teachers and great individuals who helped us to think a little bit differently and encouraged us later on to go on and not only make sure we stay in school and do all of that stuff. And I had an opportunity to go up to Washington University, where they had a great sociologist up there who really had predicted that the children from poor families could never, ever achieve anything. Broken homes, poor families, et cetera, they would never. And so when I had a first chance to go back to Washington University, I went back looking for him. I think he was dead. But I went looking for him because I wanted to tell him, stop those predictions. It is not true. I came from a poor family. And it takes a lot, and it takes people who care, and it takes adults who really, really, want to help children, not just your child, but any child, the child on your block, the child in your community. We've got to make sure that we take a look at the public policies of the administration. I want to tell you, Biden has kept the promise on everything that he said he would do. He really did. He really did. And so I want you to know he's being recorded in history as one of the greatest presidents that we have ever had. And when he left, he didn't leave us wondering what was going to happen. He said, I endorse Kamala Harris. And that was unusual. And that was very special. Now, I took a look at who Kamala is talking about as vice president. I like Tim Walz. You know what one of the things he's known for? Making sure all the children have food. Making sure all the children have food. That's so important. We have the audacity to go around talking about good nutrition. You can't have good nutrition if you don't have some good food, basic food to eat. And I want to tell you, when you're poor, you don't get much variety. I mean, you get just a few things that you eat over and over and over again. And so, whether it's housing, or whether it's food, or whether it is clothing, I tell you, so much emphasis is put on tennis shoes and clothing, and people competing, and sometimes parents falling into the trap of trying to get the latest tennis shoe for the child instead of maybe something else that should be purchased. But all of this is going on, and you know it, and I know it. I know you know it because that's why you're here. That's why you're here. So what do? Now, we're talking about registration and voting. Who should we vote for? Some young people are saying, I'm not voting for neither. Some are saying, I don't know her. Some are saying Biden was too old. I said, don't talk about his age. Hell, I'm older than Biden, And so, here's what we've got to do. We've got to make sure that this administration, McGovern should be here, by the way. He's fabulous on this issue. We've got to make sure that the administration is committed to the proposition that the quality of life will increase because of the leadership that they're going to provide. I see great signs of it now as I look at what they're talking about with housing and rental and all of that. You know, home ownership is important, but it's not the only thing. No, everybody does not want to own a home. And if you look at the cost of upkeep, maybe some of us who own it should say, we need to get out of this. You know, this is too expensive. Hell, the pipes break down, you know, the windows need refixing, and the doors are creaking, and, you know, my God, I didn't know I was getting into this mess. Maybe I should rent. And so we must say to renters, it is all right to be a renter, but you got to be treated right. Now, I'm going to wrap this up by saying I called in private equity from Wall Street, the hedge fund type people. We called them in and we said, you know, we want to talk to you about the fact that you're acquiring a lot of units, residential units. We want to talk to you about the fact that you increase the rent. We want to talk to you about you don't invest the money in keeping up the property. And we want to talk with you about the evictions that you do. And I said to them, we're going to focus on that aspect of what you do in private equity. You got a lot we don't do, but we're focusing on housing right now. We're focusing on housing, and we're giving you the opportunity to either get out of purchasing and acting in the way that you're doing, or you're going to change the way that you handle housing, rental housing. That's what this is all about. Now, this is important because these are the people who own thousands and thousands of units, and they're in collusion. Without going into the details of that, they raise the rents because they say that the data that they're given is what tells them they must do. Well, they're wrong. And that's one way that we're going to deal with that. The other thing is this. Now, the Biden people have come up with some new stuff, and I think you should be talking about that if you're not talking about that. It is lowering the rent by taking on corporate and major landlords. And this is what Biden is saying. Stop rent-setting data firms from price fixing to raise rents by double digits. Corporate landlords are using private equity-backed price-setting tools to jack up rents dramatically in communities across the country. Vice President Harris is calling on Congress to pass the Preventing the Algorithmic Facilitation of Rental Units Cartels Act to crack down on their companies that contribute to surging rent prices. Stop Wall Street investors from buying up and marking up homes in bulk. Community after community feels taken advantage of by Wall Street investors and distant landlords. Vice President Harris is calling on Congress to pass the Stop Predatory Housing Investment Act to curtail these practices by removing key tax benefits for major investors, this is really good, who acquire large numbers of single-family rental units. This is good stuff, you all. This is good stuff. This is the kind of stuff that you can say it's worth registering to vote for. And we've got to encourage people because they already know that renters don't vote the way homeowners do. What is that all about? I get it. Why should you be worried about who's elected to office? In fact, you're living in units that are broken down, that need repair, that you can't even find the landlord when you want them. They have people and telephone numbers for you to call, and you get involved with calling telephone, making telephone calls. There's nobody there. There's a referral. You don't get a return call. Nobody's doing anything. You know all of this. I don't have to tell you this. And so what I'm saying is, let's try as hard as we can to get on another foot. Let's do what the black women did when they heard that Kamala Harris was being endorsed by the president. All of a sudden, they went into action, and they think black women don't have any money. Well, some of us have a little money, Everybody gave a little money. Everybody gave a little money. The money started coming in. The money started coming in. But they don't usually expect it to come, from women in particular, women of color in particular. But I want to tell you, if you've got $1, you got 10 or 15 cents that you could put toward increasing your quality of life. And let me tell you, we've got to do everything that we can to get out, knock on doors. Don't rely basically on the internet. That's all right, but to sit at home and work the internet and think somehow that's going to get things done. No, we got to talk to our neighbors. We got to talk to our friends. If you go to church, tell the pastor to preach about renting one time, to preach about something that is absolutely, present in our lives. We know that we're living good. We're going to go to heaven and all of that. You know what I'm saying? God is good, okay? However, reducing this rent is better right now. Right now. And so I want you to be fired up. You don't have to be nice about this stuff. You know what I mean? You have to be confrontational about it. You have to say to landlords, give them a lot of trouble. I'm not moving. I'm not going anywhere. Now, I shouldn't be telling you this, but they can't stop me from saying what I want to say. And it's this. In many cities and states, they got to go through a lot of hoops before they can evict you. Make them go through the hoops. If you can't do any better, don't take your child out on the street, because the first thing you get is a notice to evict. You have to do better than that. You have to stay as long as you can until you can find a better way for you and your children to live. Listen, I've talked enough. I've got to go over and talk about housing. But thank you for having me here today. Thank you so very much. Thank you, Susie Q. Love you. Love you. All right, let's get to work. Let's get to work. All right, thank you very much.
All right, Congresswoman Maxine Waters. Woo! Okay, we're going to resume the panel now. Shannon, I want to go to you next to talk about what's going on in Chicago and the work that you're doing.
And I just want to say, for those people in the audience who already are part of the choir and understand that what Maxine Waters is saying, none of that works unless the people say it works. And she's talking about everything we're talking about. She's talking about campaigns we've been working on for 7 years. But community organizing, which is where I spent my life, connected to good policy development, where electoral politics come. Once they merge, we get shit done. Excuse my language. But I want to just talk a little bit more about what we do in Chicago to create the change that sometimes the rest of the country catches up and follow. No shade to New York, LA, Cincinnati, other places. But Chicago has been the birthplace of many movements, of many change makers. And we are cut from that cloth. So I'm from the mighty Kenwood Oakland Community Organization, better known as COCO. We've been around since 1965. We're one of the oldest black man community organizations in the city, if not the country. And we are a multi-issue organizing, direct organizing social service organization. But what I want to share with you all right now is some of the stuff that some of me and my friends here I've worked on together in collaboration. Rent stabilization is the nice term that people like. We call it rent control. Oh, you can't say rent control. Rent control, y'all.
Yep.
Rent control has been around for a long time. New York has had it for years. In the state of Illinois, we have been prohibited by law of having that in any particular jurisdiction. So we have to get something called lift the ban in our state. So my brother Rod here, Dixon, Byron's helping us on the local level. And we've been working together for years on that. So did you hear? They're catching up. She just talked about Vice President Kamala. They're catching up, which is great. But my point is the community. When we say it's going to happen, when we just say enough is enough, we know what gets done. So rent control is one thing. We have this thing, I'm going to call it what it is. We have a Trojan horse here in Chicago that some of you all are going to be dying to come see every year when it's open. It's called the Obama Presidential Center. It started as a library. This sucker is already rising and displacing folk from surrounding communities, and it's hurting black folk mostly. So that is not going to be what they're shaping
force. It's going to displace us. You got people thinking that it's going to be something good. You look at the communities of Woodlawn, and you go tell me if you thought 3 years ago you'd be looking at million-dollar homes where poverty and violence has been there for years. So last thing I'm going to say is to shut it down right here for me. One of the quality of life issues that we should all care about is life expectancy. There's a grave life expectancy between the poor neighborhoods in cities like Chicago. So it's about 14 years between the west side of Chicago and residents who live in Lincoln Park. It's probably wider than that. That's criminal. But we know what? When systems work like they set up to work, that's what happens. So the racism, white supremacy, and all the different systems that have been structuralized in these urban areas, they work how they're supposed to work. The public schools work for us, so that's why they're shitty. Charter schools ain't for us, that's why they're shitty. And when you talk about what's happening with housing, we talk about what's happening with healthcare, all of these issues, you look at there's some common denominators. There's profit, there's greed at the root of this stuff. So we know the problems, and we got solutions. So some of them are rent control. Some of them is saying let's get a CBA. So these are not all, none of these are silver bullets. Don't get it twisted. We know. We're from Chi-Town. So we know we got to come every which way. We got a lot of different weapons. We got a lot of things in our weaponry. Start talking violence. We're talking about strategy. And we know at the root of it is community organizing. The people closest to the pain should be closest to the problem.
All right. Okay, Dixon Romero.
Thanks, everybody. My name is Dixon Romeo. I'm a member of Not Median Stop. We organize in South Shore Woodlawn, similar to, really based off of Coco, right? As legacy, current work, multi-issue community organization. South Shore and Woodlawn are in the epicenter of the housing crisis when we talk about Chicago, right? We're talking about South Shore is a neighborhood that is 77% rental, right? Woodlawn's 84% rental, right? The median income is under $30,000. 90% black neighborhood. South Shore is the eviction capital of Cook County of the city. It's been that way for the last 15 years. And Woodlawn's in the top 5, right? Conversely, in addition to, I think Alderman Teacher Lopez brought up the new arrivals that are being bused here from Texas in an attempt to, kind of bring immigration and frame it negatively in the national and local context and have black and brown infight in our community. We just talked to some reporters and got some data recently that South Shore is the #1 neighborhood also for new arrivals coming into the city, right? And that's because it's cheap and because landlords are taking money from the state to house those inhumanely, right? They're getting the same improper living conditions that folks in South Shore have had for decades. And so these are all the conditions in which, right, like we exist in addition to, as Shannon mentioned, the Obama Center, which we're part of the CBA Coalition, Obama, as well as COCO. And so what are we doing to organize around this, right, to like change the conditions our folks are dealing with? So the #1 thing we do is tenant organizing, right? In Woodlawn and South Shore, Shannon and Rod were with us last week, right, where we did eviction defense for a long-term black resident, Christiana Powell, who got illegally, evicted and displaced from the neighborhood. And so when we talk about the solidarity that we have with each other, Shannon was literally, we were locking arms together, right, on Friday, right, trying to make sure Christiana could stay in her home for moments longer, get her stuff out properly. In addition to that, the Obama CBA campaign, the organizing we've been doing, in particular in South Shore, trying to get a South Shore ordinance, where we got a referendum on the ballot this year and last year, both times, 90% the first time, over 85% the second time. Folks across the neighborhood are voting in favor of CBA as a community benefits agreement. We're trying to get things around the Obama Center, right? We're not trying to stop the center, but make sure the city is doing things to ensure that folks can stay and benefit, right? We don't have more folks being evicted and displaced from our city. The ordinance, because overwhelming community support, right? I think we need elected officials who are here today. They were getting 88% of folks to vote for, make me, jump with joy, right? But we have a community issue that folks are overwhelmingly in support of. Got introduced to the city council last year. It hasn't been passed yet. And so, if you see Brandon Johnson or anybody, let them know we need that passed ASAP. But ultimately what we're organizing properties more affordable, improve conditions, and they're not doing that yet. So we've been organizing for the last 2 years as well as part of that. The stuff the White House announced around light tech units, which again is low-income housing tax credit, but the federal government is subsidizing through a tax credit to allow private developers to, and sometimes public, to develop properties, right? Like that's really good, that 10% rent cap, but ultimately, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are some of the biggest subsidizers of housing, right? And so when we talk about evictions in people's properties to bring home, right? Christiana Powell's house was an FHA property, right? But she was renting to folks in there. And so there's layers in which the local organizing, as Shannon said, is connected and builds a platform for elected officials to do the work, but it has to be guided by us, by the folks in the neighborhood. And so, yeah, I know we're running out of time, but just thank you all for listening and love to connect and tap in with you all.
All right, Dion, bring us home. And keep in mind we're recording this too. So it'll go out.
She mentioned food somehow, so I didn't feel too bad. But I know I'm standing this week, you all, and somewhere else. But I'll just touch really quick. Deon Dawson, founder and chief dreamer of Beyond Chicago Dreams, my food insecurity for the last 1 million logistics. And you're really asking why the food diet here, we're talking about poverty and homelessness, but I think we all know that when it comes to homelessness, poverty, food insecurity, health equity, unemployment, all of these things are intrinsically linked. And so when we think about that and how we've been able to approach it at Beyond Chicago Dream, it's really about addressing what we all feel is a lack of connectivity. You know what I mean? When we think about displacement, displacement usually precedes relocation. And we know that those who are often food insecure are often home insecure, and they are also a transient community. So what we've been able to do with our organization is really focus on making sure that we can connect with the people that we serve in a way that is really consistent to not only where we want to be now, but where we want to be in the future, no matter what administration ultimately is in office in November. I think it's important for us to understand that through our bi-weekly touch point, we're delivering right now in all 77 Chicagoland neighborhoods. And we're doing this every single week while also creating jobs. And all of this is important because, all of us, none of our work would mean anything if we didn't create jobs as well. I think that we have to look at a lot of different categories and a lot of different ways that we're addressing poverty to make sure that when it's all said and done, we're satisfied with what we brought to the table. And so not only with the food that we're able to provide, not only with the consistent touch points that we're able to do, but with the jobs that we're able to create, all of our jobs at least $20 an hour, so we're paying somewhat of a livable wage. I mean, when the things keep going up, that $20 will feel like $2. And so I think it's just, I'll just bring us home and just say that, the work is not done. When we're talking about homelessness, when we're talking about poverty, we're looking at it on a sliding scale. We're continuously attacking inflation. We're continuously trying to get livable wages. We're continuously trying to get benefits. And so it's extremely important that, a lot of the things that we're all fighting separately, we're all able to kind of get that connectivity so that there's a certain overlap and understanding that nothing will fall through the cracks. And I think that, it's been perfectly stated up here that everyone up here is needed to kind of bring that on home to make sure that these things aren't done in the dark, but they're actually brought to light. We know that if everyone's paying attention, and we know that we can deliver to 2,000 households every week in the Chicagoland area, and we're informing them of what's going on, great things can happen. But I mean, everybody up here, thank you for your work. Thank you for all for staying with me for the last 98 seconds. And I'm sure you can connect with anybody up here. Thank you.
And we're gonna take just a couple of really quick questions, and then we're gonna adjourn. So this gentleman back here, and then Carolyn.
Actually, I don't have a question. It's more like a statement and a humble. I have to say, this is the first time I've been back here since 1982. My first time. I am impressed with Chicago. Very impressed. Now, Chicago is the third largest city in the United States. Anyway, but my point is, I live in Utah.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I just want to say one more thing there. I appreciate you guys, and it's very good to see our men folk involved in social activism, sociology, but most of it is women that are taking the
We
lead.
did have some women on the for the panel, but they had to cancel. Sorry.
And I appreciate that.
Yeah. Sure.
What's your name again? I'm sorry.
My name is Lee Johnson.
Thank you for your comment. I'd be remiss to not comment on so the city, and this me saying it's not binding on anybody, but the city, part of the thing about the DNC we have to be honest about is that when any type of big event comes to a city, right, municipalities do go through a process in which they make sure they present well, right? So there were a lot of homeless encampments that have been removed around the city. That doesn't change your comment around like per square miles. I know like Chicago is like, the $7 area, whatever. Utah, Park Lake City is smaller, but I just wanted to name that, right? Like there was a concerted effort to remove folks who were homeless, especially closer to this area, right, into shelters. And in fact, there were some folks, some who arrived, some not, who moved out of shelters for that, right? And so, as much as we love our brother Brandon, right, and we're part of the movement to get him there, we also have to be honest and about that. So I just want to name that.
Okay. Carolyn?
I'm sorry, Deon is just now working a short amount of time. He mentioned how employment is really connected to everything he's doing around this initiative. One of the things that we're doing in Cocoa is that we're working with young men between the ages 18 and 24 years old with a project we call Bronzeville NEA. Bronzeville is the name that was given to the South Side, and something called on the South Side, where people migrated to in the 50s and 60s. But Bronzeville NEA is a project that trains young people into 3 tracks to get them ready for trades, tech, and entrepreneurship. So we didn't get a chance to talk about it because that was important, but I do hear you. Part of what we have to do, especially not-for-profits, is not have the not-for-profit mindset, because job development is something that we're not always pushed to do. Funders don't always look at that. Secondly, we have to also talk about not just creating jobs to go work for someone else, but how to be entrepreneurs. And that's the focus of, that's the third track, is entrepreneurship.
Yep. Cool. All right. Okay. They have to do very quick questions with one answer. Okay.
Right, no, you're right. I think what the number was 19,000 below our maximum we could have. Oh, I see. So CHA ain't built it. We need to build those, but we do have a lot of empty units. No, I agree with you. What we gotta do is first. 452 of them sit in my neighborhood. And see, CHA has a sweet idea for Chicago Housing Authority get money, they get resources and money for the units, whether someone's in them or not. That's it. So where's the incentive for them to make sure that it has a body? So what we have to do is, one, we gotta get rid of Tracy Scott there in CHA. We need to get a new CHA board, and we need to come up with a new plan for the housing authority that's focused on the tenants and getting the housing that our communities need. That's what we gotta do.
Okay, we have 70,000 vacant units in the city of Los Angeles alone. Okay.
I'm gonna come down here, I'm gonna get your info, we're gonna wrap up.
Yep.
You go to obamacva.com or Instagram, there's a Twitter, there's all the things, but I'll follow you. I wanted to just real quick, Susie, the woman, I missed her name, who talked about like the jobs piece. One of the things that we found in South Shore is that most small business entrepreneurs, like the rent also eats first for commercial spaces as well, right? And one of the things when we talk about rent control or the CBA is that the same people who are jacking up prices in residential units are also raising prices in commercial spaces. And so these things we are doing aren't like, of course the focus is, you know, directly affecting people, but these also do have real implications for local economies in the neighborhood, right? The reason why you're building on 71st Street and other streets in South Shore, 63rd Street and Woodlawn, and there's a lack of commercial space for you to get things you need, but also for you to work, is because the rent is too high for local businesses as well, right? And so that's a really key point I just wanted to add.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I want